Lin.
Yeah, hey everyone, welcome. My name is Lin. It's also my second year on the AAae Foundation board, and now I'm serving as a co-chair for the Student Outreach Committee. So thanks for joining, and I'm excited to bring this series for you guys.
Along with my co-host, we have a panel whom we will introduce later. It would be great to have everyone turn on their camera. We'd love to see your faces, but totally not turn on your camera. Here's the agenda for the evening. First, we have the AAae introduction by the Foundation Vice President. We will then go into a brief description of the project roles and traditional delivery of a project. Third, we have a Q&A with our wonderful panel, and then a breakout session where you will have a chance to connect with our panelists more casually. This will be dependent on how much time we have left. So we may or may not have the breakout session. Please welcome our VP, AAae Baker.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. As Crystal said, I'm AAae Baker with NAC Architecture. I'm also the Vice President of the AAae Foundation Board. Every year, the AAae Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization, we focus all of our energy and passion into providing scholarships and educational opportunities for students as well as recent graduates. And as a AAae member, you're always kept up to date on all of the events that we offer, just like this webinar that we're having right now, as well as mentorship opportunities, networking opportunities, and our scholarship deadlines. And we actually just closed our scholarships this past Friday, but do stay tuned for the scholarships that we offer next year. Another thing that's really great about the foundation is that our board is quite small. It's made up of just over a dozen people. So whenever you send us an email, there is a real live person on the other side, just like me, Alex, and Crystal, reading those emails. So if you ever have any questions, if you have questions about this webinar after it ends, or if you just want to know more about the AAae or any other volunteer opportunities, please feel free to reach out. We always love hearing from you. And we do have a lot of really great volunteers helping us with putting together our programs, and to have more help would always be great. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Good. Thanks, Janica. You were explaining the purpose and mission of AAae. Now, one of the main reasons we want to host this series is really for our student members and hopefully for more engagement and more value to our organization. So we really want to help students understand the industry a little better. I want to take a moment to introduce the different phases and roles of a project. And our series will bring professionals for each different roles of a project and kind of share a little bit what they do. So first, we start with the project owner. Okay, so these are landowners who are funding the projects. It could be a government agency or a private developer. And once they determine what they want to build, whether it's a hospital, a park, a train station, airport, it could be anything. And then these owners and agency would then hire an architect or engineer, and through the request for RFP process, request for proposals, and they list out details about what each architect we have want to design and how much the quote for their service will be. And then these design professionals then put together the construction documents. These are plans and specs. And oftentimes our projects are multidisciplinary in nature, or requires specialized helps, which are MEPs and others. So MEPs are mechanical engineers, electrical engineer, plumbing engineers, and sometimes also sustainable professionals and geotech engineers to help with the construction documents. Then after we really put together the PS&E package, we then go into construction. So these are your general contractors who then oversees the construction and also provide the crews and equipment, also source raw construction materials. So after you have your project that's built and complete, it will then turn it back to the owners for everyone to for them to operate and maintain, and until the owner decides to repair or upgrade it again, and we kind of restart the process. So, but if you have any questions on this, we can talk about more about it later after our panel. So I say, Crystal, that's back to you.
So before we go into the Q&A, please take a quick poll to let us know where you are in your career and what career path you're interested in.
Yeah, right now everyone should do the poll.
All right, I still see responses coming in.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, let me share this.
Okay.
So this, cool. So we have mostly university students and working professionals.
Yes. And a good mix of architecture, interior design, landscape, sustainability, other. So we have a good mix of interests. This also shows we need to outreach more to our community college students and our high school students, and we will work on that. Thank you everyone for responding. If you have any questions during the Q&A, please add them into the chat box. Our Q&A panelists for the evening are Feng Wang from Harley Ellis Devereux, HED, Rachel Bannon Godfrey from Santec, Gary Lai from AAae MIG, John Ladle from NAC Architecture, Denise Ramos from HED, and I will be the moderator. I'm an architectural designer at HED. Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone's face. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves with more detail. Please tell us the type of projects you work on and the years you've been in the industry. And let's start with Feng.
Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name is Feng. I'm a project architect with 10 years of experience. I work on multiple types of projects right now, mainly on commercial and residential. I work, as Crystal mentioned, with HED, which is a architectural engineering firm. I work with Crystal and Denise, who's also in the panel.
Thank you, Feng. Fun fact, Feng and I are working together on a residential modular project. She's been a great leader. And another architect here is Rachel. Rachel, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Bannon Godfrey. I'm the Sustainability Discipline Leader for Stantec. So I make sure that we are applying principles of sustainability and resiliency in all of our projects. I've close to 20 years experience, which means, of course, I started when I was, a toddler. And I've worked in nearly every building type you can imagine, and in every continent except Africa. I've actually even worked in Antarctica. So lots of different experiences. And thanks for having me on the panel today. I actually worked in the Bay Area for many years before moving. I'm now in Colorado, but very familiar with the Bay Area, and that's where I really cut my teeth in architecture. So thanks for having me on the panel.
Thank you, Rachel. Sustainability is so crucial in our industry. I can't wait to hear more because I myself am interested in this career path, so I can't wait to hear. Another sustainable champion is Gary Lai. Gary, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, thank you, Crystal. My name is Gary Lai. I'm a principal and director of regenerative design for AAae MIG. AAae MIG is a multidisciplinary firm. I'm a landscape architect by trade, but we also have planning and communications, outreach, and scientists actually that work for our firm. Let's see, I've been working a little bit longer than Rachel, about 30 years. This is my 30th year in the profession. And we work on all sorts of projects. Vertical, in terms of buildings, we work on healthcare, schools, housing, everything. And horizontal, we work on parks primarily, but we also do streetscapes, urban design, planning, and all that sort of stuff. So we just opened a park in South LA, Magic Johnson Park. So that just gives you an example.
Great. More than ever, I've really appreciated the work of landscape architects. Because of working from home, I find myself wanting to be outside with nature to take a break from being indoors all day. So thank you for what you do. Landscape architecture is very important. Now let's go to John.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Alex and AAae for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm John Laitzel. I work at NAC Architecture. I'm a job captain there. We do a lot of public work, so schools. I'm working on a couple of projects. One is a high school in the CA phase, so it's in construction as we speak, and a middle school building, which is in the construction documents phase. So we're essentially preparing drawings to get approved by the governing authorities, in this case, the state. And yeah, I've been in the industry for about 5 years now, which I'm sure Gary and Rachel would agree that it's still just getting our feet wet. So thanks for having me.
I myself have only been in the industry for about 5 years as well, so I'm there with you. Fun fact, I met John through a colleague at HED. That shows how important it is to create a network of support. In times of need, it's great to have people like John and the rest of the panel to step up and give back to the community. Next, Denise.
Hi, thank you, Crystal, and thank you everyone for having me. My name is Denise Ramos, and I work with Feng and Crystal at HED. I'm a part of the interior design group. I have about 7 years of experience, which has consisted of high-end residential and retail, and most recently corporate commercial and educational projects. At HED, we have a diverse set of clients and projects that vary in size and scope. And because of this, I've gained expanded knowledge due to everyday challenges, such as making sure that materials withstand chemical abrasions and coordinating power for furniture and equipment.
Fun fact, Denise and I both went to Woodbury University, although she was in the interior design program and I was in the architecture program. And I graduated in 2015. When did you graduate?
In 2014. So right
2014,
before, 1 year
okay.
before. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. Briefly explain your career path. Why did you choose your career and how did you get there? And let's start with John.
Let me unmute. So yeah, I was actually very interested in psychology. So out of high school, I started taking psych courses. I just really enjoyed learning about behavior, kind of why we think and do certain things the way we do. It was all just kind of fascinating to me. And so I was taking psych courses at my local community college, which doesn't look like there's any community college students here, but I think it's worth noting. And it wasn't until I learned that there was another community college about 30 minutes and a toll bridge away that offered an architecture program. So I took the scenic route, I guess. And, I really enjoyed drawing, sketching and everything like that. So I thought, let's give it a go. And I remember taking a freehand sketching course. And my professor walks up to me, she says, "Do you mind if I use your sketch as an example?" So I said, "Of course, I deserve all the praise I can get." And so she holds up my sketch and she goes, "Everyone, this is what I don't want you to do."
Oh.
So off to a great start already. But, I just fell in love with all of it, kind of, designing the tools, the technologies, the conceptualization, ideation, the craftsmanship. I just really learned the fundamentals there. And more importantly, they showed me how to put together a portfolio, which led me to transfer into Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I got my degree. As part of the program in your 4th year, you're given the opportunity, it's a 5-year program, to study abroad. And the list goes on to kind of where you can study from San Francisco to Washington, DC, out of country like Denmark and Germany. I actually chose to study here in LA with the professional studio program and the Cal Poly LA Metro program. And this is where I learned, gained a lot of valuable experience. The way the curriculum was set up, we were interning 2 days out of the week at an office, and the other 3 days we were working on our studio project. So I just really learned firsthand how to kind of work in the office and just talk to all the professionals there, kind of talk to them how to see how they got to where they are. And we were very lucky enough to be given the opportunity to kind of use their facilities as well. So I was able to kind of tinker, and I was able to 3D print with powder for the first time, which just really propelled my my interest in the whole field in general. So I was really exposed to the different pockets, bubbles, or facets, or whatever you want to call it, that operate in this kind of broader boundaries of the industry. So naturally, when I graduated, I kind of just gravitated towards coming back to LA. So I'm here now, kind of exploring all that.
Awesome. Yeah, perseverance is key. I'm glad you still kept with it even after they said they didn't like your drawing. For me, I actually, so I started a year in architecture. I applied and then I was denied. So then I switched my major to interior design, got my bachelor's, and said it wasn't enough, and then I got my master's in architecture, and yeah, now I'm here. Perseverance is key. You gotta keep going, even if there are people who don't believe.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to prove people wrong. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Let's see, Gary.
Thanks, Crystal, John. So I go back a little bit further, I suppose. Let's see. So when I graduated in the mid '80s from high school, I always knew I was going to be something in the architecture engineering discipline, because my father was a civil engineer for Caltrans. So I was kind of just following the family business, I guess you could say. I did not get into UC Berkeley. I was foolish to go after electrical engineering, which I'm so glad I didn't actually go into. And I went to UC Davis. So at UC Davis, I fell in love twice. I fell in love with my future wife at UC Davis, and I also fell in love with landscape architecture. It seemed to be a really interesting combination of what I was interested in, the environmentalism and design. So I found it to be incredibly interesting. But like Crystal's giving fun facts, fun fact, out of all my years that I've been in landscape architecture, UC Davis is a very environmental school. I was learning all sorts of stuff environmentally based at UC Davis in the late '80s. And I didn't actually start using that until the mid 2000s. So talk about perseverance. It's been a pretty interesting ride for me. I've worked all over the state, from the Central Valley, Central Coast, San Francisco, Bay Area, and now in Los Angeles. And I achieved being a principal of a firm only about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's been an interesting ride.
So what caused you to move around the state?
Oh, work, where the work is. So, if you think about it, since the '80s, I've been through 3 recessions, including the Great Recession, and then one that was specific to the Bay Area, which was when the dot-com bust happened. So, we moved down here because Denise, my wife's mother, had cancer, so we moved down to take care of her down here. So, but the good thing is that I know how to navigate most of the cities in California. We've moved around so much.
Awesome. Another person who has moved around a lot is Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. So I got my bachelor's of architecture in Ireland. And then my professor at the time was one of the experts within the European Union for sustainable design. And he had just finished doing guest lecturing for a year, I think at UC Berkeley. And I heard him talking about it. And I was doing some research for the European Union at the time in sustainable design. And I just thought, that sounds like a really cool place to be. So I went over to Berkeley, did my Master's of Architecture, and have not left since, not left the States since then. So after getting my Master's in Architectural Science, I went into engineering. I was doing facade engineering, and then the first of the, whatever, I guess 3 recessions, Gary, I'm there with you there, hit, and I was just put onto a bunch of different things. Whatever work was available, I was doing. Stormwater management plans. I mean, anything that I just was not qualified for, they put me on, which was a survival technique at the time for the firm, but really worked to my advantage in terms of my, my later career path. So doing a bunch of different work in engineering, and then I went back into architecture for many years. And then this new field of energy modeling and sustainability consulting was really picking up. And I thought that sounds really exciting. So I jumped over to be a sustainability consultant for the architecture firm that I had been working for. And then another recession hit and we moved. And then here I am now at the sustainability leader for Stantec. So basically, architecture, engineering, consulting, and then back into consulting. And now I'm back in an architecture firm.
Wow. Thank you, Rachel. Denise.
So I have not moved around very much around the state. I'm a local Angelino and I love the area. I'm born and raised in the Valley and I wanted to stay local. So I went to Woodbury University and I graduated in 2014. I studied interior architecture. Originally, I was going to study architecture, but then I thought about how we as humans inhabit spaces. And I am very petite. I am 4'11", and so that has always been at the forefront of my experiences with everything in our environment. So I've always had a curiosity with why things are certain heights, why casework is the height that it is, why I can't reach the top shelf, why I have to climb on things in order to reach things. So that has always made me curious about the way that other people inhabit interior environments as well. And as studying interior architecture, that has paved the way for me to influence other people's experiences from the way that lights, colors, scale, and forms influence our everyday experiences, whether we think about it or not. So I use all of those observations in my everyday planning. So once I graduated from Woodbury University, I worked for a closet designer, and that really had me start at a small scale to really think about the way that people experience storing their personal belongings. And the interior designer that I worked for, she would take retail concepts and put them into people's homes. So that then helped me transition into my next position, which was working for a retail firm. And with that retail firm, I worked on a lot of retail environments, which included grocery stores, and working with architects and graphic designers and brand strategists to rework their designs and really think about the branding retail environment. From there, I joined a boutique firm where our team developed high-end residential houses and commercial interiors. And with those elements and with all of the elements that I had previously learned, we really thought about the way that residential and commercial could really blend together in order to create a more comforting work environment for our everyday lives. And since then, I've worked predominantly on commercial interiors and educational projects in California. So everything has stayed pretty local to California. As you can probably tell from my past experience, there's been a very wide blend of the different project types that I've been designing and that I've been involved with the teams that I've been a part of. And I've found that as I've transitioned from one point to the next, it has slowly influenced each next experience, and it has really paved the way for the way that my experience has gone so far.
Awesome. Thank you, Denise. Feng.
Yes, thank you, Crystal. So I had my undergraduate, I went to undergraduate school in China and then came here for graduate education in USC. And I think I was tricked into architecture. At the at the time to at high school, at the time to select a major, I didn't really know which one to pick. And I thought that I would pick something related to math or physics. And then I was told those are really boring. And architecture is just so much fun. And then I was also told that it doesn't matter what you choose to study in university. Once you graduated, you can always pick a different career. So apparently that's not easy, right? I wouldn't say that's not true, but that's not easy to do. But at the time I thought, okay, I mean, I give a shot since it's so much fun. So I got into architecture school, and I was so confused for the first couple years in school because I think my mind and my brain just operated too rationally, and then architecture apparently it's very very subjective. There's no right or wrong, good or bad in a way. There's no singular answer to a question. I was confused. I don't know if anyone else had the same confusion. Then I get used to it. I sort of understand it better, and I did fine in school. After graduation, I worked in a small architectural firm in LA called Design Arc. I worked all on multiple types of projects there. At the end of several years of my previous job, I worked on several luxury houses. One of the houses in Idaho. So I had to travel a lot, set visit, talk with the owner, talk with the contractor, resolve details, had a discussion with contractor and figure out details. So, and then I can see the result the next day. I think that really gave me a sense of an answer, and I can get the feedback from the owner as well. So I really enjoyed that. So previously in my previous job, it was more focused on design. So we did a lot of schematic design, computations. So after I shift to HED, join HED, I shifted more to the technical side, creating construction documentation and go to site visit during construction. So I think that just worked with me better on that. I didn't mean to separate design and the technical. A good architect should know both, should be good at both. Just sometimes you focus on one thing at a period of time. And I have a very strong interest in new technologies, searching for a better way, a more effective way for construction. So now I'm working with Crystal on a modular project. As you know, it means that the unit, it's a residential project, the unit will be constructed in a factory and delivered on site and assemble on site. So I'm very excited to see the final result.
Me too, I'm very excited. It's both of our first time working on a modular project, so it's a bit challenging, but very exciting. And I totally get it when you were confused. I was confused when I went into architecture school. Weirdly, my the interior design program was more technical than my architecture education. So Woodbury is really out of the box in architecture, but it was fun. A lot of experimentation. So let's go into the second next question. What is the significance of your discipline and what role do you play in a typical project? Let's work our way from the inside out. Denise, since you are interior designer, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. The significance of an interior designer is a heightened sensitivity to human skill, I would say. It can encompass everything within the building envelope in some cases, or in other cases, it's limited to the selections of FF&E, which includes finishes, furnishings, and equipment. We always work with architects, engineers, and various types of consultants. I think according to the AAae, we're technically considered a consultant, but we focus more on our side. So for instance, a lot of the coordination that happens, one example is if we have a classroom, we make sure that the computer tables have power, that the lighting is placed and located and specified so that it doesn't cause glare, and so that the furniture and finishes can withstand daily abuse. So this would involve coordinating with architects, lighting and electrical engineers, furniture dealers, and product representatives, to name a few. My role within a project, it varies based off of the project scope. And I'm always working on several projects at a time, which are all in different stages of design. Sometimes I'm working on selecting finishes for project presentations, and other times I'm setting up furniture showcases so that the clients can test out the furniture before they purchase it. And one of the benefits of my job is that every day is different and I'm never bored. I think that's true of all of our jobs.
Yeah. There's always a lot going on. So interior designers collaborate a lot with architects. And let's go with John.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. So I like to think that we make things look good and function beautifully. I was at a similar, in my community college, I was at a similar kind of seminar. And this architect, she said something that really resonated with me. And she said, you know, we make the pretty picture. And you can unpack that in a million different ways. But that's something that really resonated with me that I think I still carry through my work to today. Because not only do we want things to like look good, right? It's kind of like Feng was saying, it's pretty subjective, but we all have an idea of what looks good or what's pleasing. But it's also our responsibility to make sure things function well. They function better than it looks. Kind of like what Denise was saying, like there's more to a window than just offering light in, right? You know, we start learning things like biophilia. We learn that students actually learn better when they have a connection to the outside. And, you know, the way your kind of your brain works and your attention span. So on kind of a typical project, like I said, I'm working on a high school that's in construction right now. We tend to get a lot of RFIs, which is a request for information, meaning they're having some kind of issues or something in field that you know, the team needs to address. And so we get to wear a lot of hats in that sense, where, you know, sometimes you're a problem solver, sometimes you're you know, you're an investigator, you're a detective, sometimes you're a leader, sometimes you're kind of the mule. But I think you know, it's kind of our responsibility to not just make sure things work, but make sure everybody's eyes are on this thing, and that all gears are kind of turning into the right direction. It's kind of our responsibility to uphold that, not just again, not just uphold the aesthetics of it, not just make it look good, but to kind of Denise's point, make sure things are working so that it works for everyone. And I think that's very important to understand with kind of our profession.
Thanks, John. So note that John is a job captain and not licensed yet, but on your way to be licensed?
I've started.
Yes, me too. I started studying. But Feng is a licensed architect. So Feng, tell us. Yes.
So I think a project architect is basically the coordinator of the design team. Not only the design team, the entire project team.
Mhm.
I think we're sort of doing the admin work. That's how I feel right now. Because we know a little bit of everything and rely on others' expertise. So I see this as I receive information, digest, review, and send the information to the right party to process. So as a project architect, I work with, at least in my firm AAae, I work with a project manager who's more focused on budget, contract, client relationship, and they also put the effort to assemble the team. Project architects, project member, sometimes consultants. I focus on provide the design solution for and then construction documentation. I have daily communication with and coordination with contractor, with city, with client, with consultants, with vendors. Yeah, and then we work out the project with all the team member and consultants together. It's a team effort.
Awesome, thank you, Feng. So we have the interior designer, the architects, and then we have Rachel, who is architect and then specialist in sustainability, looking at the bigger picture of the environment.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. So your question was, what is the significance of our role? And really the significance of the sustainability professional, the resilience professional, the regenerative design professional, as Gary is that it's everything. I mean, every single decision any one of you make as designers can either work towards or against a sustainable future for all of us, a resilient future, looking at basically the future of all of our lives, because every single design decision you make, whether it impacts the material, whether it impacts how much energy a building is using, whether it impacts how resilient a site is, every single decision impacts the life of somebody. So if you think about, as a designer, you're choosing a material. Let's say you're an interior designer and you're choosing the carpet tile. There's somebody's living next to the manufacturing plant where that carpet is being manufactured, and there's some plants are emitting toxic emissions into the air, some are not. Somebody's living next to the highway that material is being delivered either thousands of miles or only 50 miles, and they're breathing in the emissions from that transportation. Somebody's installing that product, and it could be that they're installing a product that has no harmful chemicals in, or they're installing one that is full of harmful chemicals. And then somebody is living, working, playing in that building or sitting in that landscape for hours, days, months, weeks, years, and it, again, is being impacted by that material. So really on the material side, and the same thing for the energy side, everything you plug in, every time the glass that you specify for building, that impacts the amount of energy that building is using. The site, the layout of a landscape, the plants that you choose, the materials that you choose for the edging, every single decision impacts somebody's life somewhere, and then all of us collectively, right? Because the community is only as strong as the weakest group of people in it. So there is, and I'm not saying that to make it sound like I have the most important job. My job is connecting dots. So my job is to help the designers on my teams understand okay, when you make that particular decision, here are all the things it's going to impact. So let's just think about how we can make a better decision in this moment. What are our options are available to us? Do we understand that the choice of, glazing, how that's going to impact this whole range of different things? And so just helping people understand that the domino effect, or if you think about a spider's web and your decision at the beginning, at the middle of that spider's web, it has all sorts of connections. And so that's the significance. And I love the question there. And I know you're probably going to get the question later, but every community that we work in has a different relationship with nature, has a different cultural kind of reckoning or cultural understanding, or like I said, cultural relationship of the natural world, or even what community means, what it means to support community. And so that's what makes sustainability and particularly resiliency really, really interesting.
So when in the project do you jump in? Is it at the beginning, or does it vary between projects?
So it does vary. Ideally, I jump in when a project is just a spark in a client's mind, and we start talking to a client months before, about what does sustainability mean to your organization? What does resiliency mean? What are your risks? What are your vulnerabilities? What are your plans? And we start talking, and then an RFP will hit the street. And that's when we start saying, okay, you want a new rec center, you want, housing, or even a lot of times we're also working with clients on just sustainability plans for their company. So when the RFP hits, make sure that everybody on the team understands, okay, this type of building, this is the type of analysis we should do, the type of modeling. This is what resiliency will probably mean to this client. This is what sustainability will probably mean to this client. And then when we get started, that very first visioning and kickoff session, that's where we make sure that the design team and the client are all on the same page about what does sustainability mean? What does resiliency mean in this context? How should we address it? What are the things we're going to look at? And then all the way through to the end, even the post-occupancy, for example, with the net zero building, we've worked with clients before for years afterwards. How are you measuring your energy use? Are you hitting net zero every year? We've even helped clients hire energy managers for the long term. So at any point in the project, ideally the very beginning, but there's always those teams that think, oh, sustainability, can you come in and do a code drawing for us? That does not work.
Yeah, no. I have a lot of questions, but I'll save it for the end. Gary, sustainability in the landscape.
Yeah, it's interesting. Landscape architecture, since I've been in the business, has been a market shift. There's been a big shift between the roles that we play on projects. When I first started, the reason why it took so long for me to actually get into environmentalism is that there wasn't a lot of, surprisingly, not a lot of environmentalism in landscape architecture in the late 80s. We were expected to beautify the buildings and beautify projects. And beautify usually meant that we would do grass, English country garden, Central Park. And we would copy that all over the state and all over the country and all over the world, because that was what was in demand. As the profession matured, and as we matured as a society here, and sustainability becomes more important, the role of a landscape architect has changed. We now talk about context. Putting in a building in LA is much different than putting in a building in New York or Pacific Northwest or Minnesota, or for that matter, in the middle of a desert in Palm Springs. Context is important. The context and the ability to be connected to the natural world is important. And the plants that we plant here in LA for drought tolerancy, for example, is very, very important. We're going into another drought this year, a bad one. Is going to be very bad this year, and that we cannot sustain ourselves here in LA from a water point of view. We have to import, and there's drought all over the Western United States. So what does that mean? It means that me putting in turf everywhere, the English country garden look, is not going to be the appropriate look, right? So the landscape architecture has melded much more with the hard biological sciences, biodiversity, ecology. stormwater retention, and what that means, heat island effect. All of those particular things has become very important to the profession and has made us actually more important to project teams now that we're going after more sustainable buildings. We deal with a lot of social issues like food deserts. A food desert is where a community has no access to healthy foods. For example, that's projects I've worked on in community gardens has to do with that. Equity. The fact that landscape architects can also be planners, like I said, horizontal versus vertical work. Why is 100% of the freeways built in LA gone through communities of color, and 100% of the freeways that were planned in white communities never was realized. There's an equity factor in what we do too. So that context and what we do as a landscape architect has become more important over the years. And I think it's going to become more important as we move forward. My role within a project is that I'm principal of a firm, meaning that I represent the firm, AAae MIG. I like to say that my days are conversation after conversation of uncomfortable conversations. In other words, as the leader, I'm expected the buck stops with me. If someone has a complaint over anything, I can't pass that on to anybody else. I deal with those problems. But, also as principal, I set the vision. I set where the firm, at least my group within the firm, is going. Regenerative design is my vision, and it's my vision to put together those teams to go after work to doing that. Also, as a principal, I'm expected to bring in work. That's a very important point. If you can't bring in work, usually I learned over the years that technical excellence will get you so far, but really in a capitalistic society that we live in, it's bringing in the work. And that's what ultimately got me to become a principal of a firm, is the ability to be able to do that.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for giving that principal perspective. Let's pause here and take some questions from our students. Let's see, Paulette, any questions on the chat?
There hasn't been a question yet.
Oh, I think we have one from Mikey
One from
Demoto.
Michael.
Yep, there's one from oh, perfect. Okay, so for the panelists, have you noticed a difference between your background, ethnic culture, and the profession that you are in today? Pros and cons for that.
So have you noticed a difference between your background, ethnic culture, and the profession that you are in today? Pros and cons. Anyone can take this question.
Okay, so I'll start. I'm going to say, so my family came over, my great-grandfather came over when working on the Intercontinental Railroad and settled in San Francisco. So our family's been here for over 100 years. And so as an Asian American, I've been here my family's been here a long time. So I guess the answer to that question is that I've had a certain realization about what my ethnicity actually means to other people, as opposed to what it means to me as an American teenager and American man. My inner thoughts are very much American, but I'm not viewed that way. And especially recently, I'm not viewed that way. And as going back and looking at my family history, the Chinese Exclusion Act was not implemented, was not gotten rid of until 1952, and where Chinese Americans could not own land here in California. And when I could trace back when my grandfather owned his first house was 1953, was able to move out of San Francisco Chinatown. And my father, who was an excellent civil engineer, was only able to get a job through Caltrans. No public, private company would hire a Chinese American back in those days. So I feel myself very lucky that I've had my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father to pave the way for me. to become a principal. But I do know that that's lucky that has happened, that it would not have happened if it wasn't for them paving their way to fight for equality here in the United States.
I would, oh, go ahead. Oh, okay. I would like to add, sorry, I thought I was interrupting someone. I am a first generation, both female university student and also first generation Mexican American student here in California. I would like to second what Gary said, and one of my neighbors growing up, she went through a lot of the racism through being Hispanic in Los Angeles, and I would have to say that I am very fortunate that my parents came at the time that they did, and that they were sticklers in my family getting an education. I do have to say that now, as I've had some years of experience, I have noticed that the education system tends to be more influenced by European methods. And so me personally, I'm trying to connect more with my Mexican side of understanding Mexican architecture. That is a pet project that I've started to do so that I can connect with my Mexican heritage and with that of my parents. That being said, the tendency of, I believe, European influence is very ingrained within not only what things are considered beautiful, but also the idea of what is good design. So I think that our descendants and our understanding of our cultures is a really big factor in understanding what is important for the community that we live in, and also the designs and how they influence our environment.
I really agree with what Denise just said. I don't know if I'm answering this question, but I do have some thought to share related to my background. So I grew up in a really small town that's close to Beijing, and it's where the summer palace of the Qing Empire. They spend their summer over there. So it's a huge, I would say, a huge palace, a huge garden. And then to me, architecture always just a small part of the nature. And I think the same idea, it's culture-wise, human are not important. We are just a part of the nature. Just the same as we don't, in the ancient time, especially in China, there's no architect, no famous architect. No one knows their name. They're just part of the process, part of the construction. But here, not here, but right now, I think overall, architects, there are so many famous architects and then famous buildings that is so different with what's the content. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's what I see as a difference, and make me think that whether or not there's another way to proceed with architecture design.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Not everyone needs to answer. So the next question is for Rachel and others. Do you see some markets have a higher demand for sustainability than others? For example, I noticed that education and corporate projects are more oftenly certified for LEED compared to hospitality projects.
Yeah, great question, Jen. So a lot of things changed around January. A lot of markets, demand that we're seeing in different markets changed not only during the pandemic, but also with the new administration coming in. So for a long time, federal projects actually have been really leading in resiliency, right? Because the military projects, a lot of military projects realize that resiliency is key to every dollar that we're spending on our troops, for example. Yes, education projects, a lot of education projects look at sustainability, but they have such limited budgets that a lot of times there's a limit with what we can do, but you might have an entire school district saying, we want to get every building to LEED Silver, for example. So you're right to bring up education. Corporate projects is it's a mixed bag. We have some companies saying, you know, we've made some corporate sustainability goals. We want all of our corporate offices to be energy efficient and so on, and that helps. And some other, it actually varies by profession. There's a big difference we see between, you know, some of the like a financial company versus a law firm versus a consulting firm. Most recently, we've seen a lot of demand for master planning. So that might not be a specific, you know, market sector, but we're seeing a lot of companies during the pandemic saw that, hey, you know, we don't have enough money right now to invest in new buildings, or we don't have enough money to upgrade our offices. But how about, could you do a plan for us? What should we do once we have more money? How should we be more sustainable? You are right to mention hospitality. That is a hard nut to crack. Hospitality, they're just not there yet. However, the health and wellness movement really helped. So health and well-being is really impacted by design, right? There's lots of design strategies that you can do that will have a proven impact on your health and well-being. And so hospitality is so high. If we want more people to stay in our hotels, if we want more people in retail, excuse me, if we want more people to come and spend money, we have to do something that proves the health and well-being of the people. So so that's what that one is lagging, but I think the federal, and then of course, lastly, recently the Biden administration put a big push on the GSA and federal agencies to look at their sustainability goals, look at how to make their facilities more resilient. And so we are seeing that the GSA, which is government buildings, and are also really bringing a lot of opportunities there too.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Rachel has said. I do want to sort of step back a little bit. Sustainability is dictated on what we believe and value as a society. And you can see a market shift of that happening again over the last 10 years, I would say, a market shift between what we value as a society and what we're doing. So, you know, when we talk about government policies, the Clean Air Act, for example, you know, that's pushed by us. We elect officials based on those values, and you know, we all know the mixed bag that's happening here in the United States. You're lucky to be on the West Coast, for example. You're lucky to be in LA if you're practicing here, because we value sustainability and resiliency here. The corporations also, to a certain extent, are based on the values. You don't buy. We've been voting with our paychecks. For example, the organic farming movement. Economists around the world, when that first started in the late 80s, said that it would never work because it'd be more expensive than other fruits and vegetables. And we voted with our paychecks. Now we buy more expensive fruits, but the economists never would have thought. Keynesian economists never would have thought that we would ever do that. And so, you know, what we do as a society and what we value makes a difference on what happens. Corporate America is slowly moving over, even though that it's all about money with corporate America in a capitalist society that we live in. But you look at, for example, the news that ExxonMobil had 2 environmentalists put on their board against the CEO's recommendation. That is fantastic. So things are moving in that direction, and it will only move more in that direction if we as a society value what it's about. if we value sustainability, we will move in that direction. And I think that that's what's happening now in the markets.
Yeah, Gary, I completely agree. And one other thing, I think the term sustainability is we're seeing a more refined definition. So if I said to you all, here's a sustainable building, here's a sustainable landscape, that could mean anything. Like it's a very broad general definition. And so what we're seeing now is clients coming to us, and instead of saying, I want a sustainable building, they're saying, I want a carbon neutral building. I want a climate positive landscape. I want a resilient landscape, or I want, I want a resilient Air Force base. And there's a greater, so sustainability, resiliency, two different things. But definitely when we start to talk about carbon and climate, we're getting much closer to a more defined definition of sustainability, because it's all about carbon emissions, right? We have to bring down the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So if we talk about sustainability and we're just looking at bike racks and things like that, then we're not going to really move the needle. So Gary, I completely agree with everything you said, and I add to that we're seeing a more nuanced understanding of what it will take to make a sustainable society, and it's about carbon and climate risk and social justice as well.
Thank you, Rachel and Gary. So we're going to, so that was the last, yeah, that was the last question we're going to take from our participants. We're going to go into our custom questions. John, the question I have for you is, what were some of the benefits, advantages, or disadvantages, if any, in starting at a community college, then transferring into a four-year college?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's not that there's no community college students here, but I definitely, transferring in, I definitely felt like I was at a disadvantage. And it was, looking back at, I think it definitely had to do with just kind of my personal way of thinking. But, I felt like, I'm kind of jumping in as a third year. So everyone who was there started as first years, they had this 2 years of experience and education that they had over me. So in kind of working with that mindset, it really felt like, oh, they know things that I don't. They were given direction to success that I haven't. But looking back now, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I was also taking in with me the things that I had learned from my schools, from my education and things like that. But the absolute best benefit of kind of going that route was really being able to afford my education, to be able to afford school. Cost of tuition is much lower at community colleges. When I was finally able to transfer into Cal Poly, I was a bit older and recognized as an independent. So financial aid really helped me out and essentially funded my whole tuition. So I was very, very, very fortunate to not have to worry about paying for tuition. I had to, worry about rent, all the supplies and materials, which there is a lot of. I'm sure, all the students here are learning that. But yeah, it really just gave me the opportunity to, again, just afford my education. It was kind of the biggest elephant in the room for me, coming from a single parent, low income household. The money, the help paying for school was kind of that big deterrent in the beginning. So kind of taking my time, the scenic route, I guess, if you will, it really let the cards fall into the right place for me.
That's great. I'm glad it worked out. As a first generation, I too had to figure out how to pay for everything. And
yeah, so I just want to urge to all the students out there, do your research, find out about financial aid, find out about your grants and scholarships, because they're out there. Even if you don't think you qualify for something, go for it, because you never know. The worst you can hear is a no, and it's not like you had that money anyways, so you're not losing anything.
Exactly. And AAae has annual scholarships, so apply for
There you
those.
go.
Fun question for you. What was the most important thing you gained out of school that has helped you transition from student to professional in the industry?
I think the most important thing is that I know how to manage a deadline. I think that's we all spend several nights at the end of a semester for studio projects. So I remember the last straw was when I was in the last semester of my undergraduate. The last day of deadline, I realized that I didn't have enough time for the interior renderings, which were required. And then I had to throw in some screenshot from the model just to meet the requirements. And so as you can imagine, it went pretty bad. And then even though I put in a lot of efforts and time into the project and other drawings, it just didn't look good for the entire presentation. And I can still remember that the anxiety I felt at the time when I realized I don't have enough time. So I learned that I should never leave the important test to the last minute. Even though that sounds like a very easy thing that we should all understand, but I learned it the hard way. So I think many times we tend to look into the test that right in front of us and forget the big picture, because it's easy just to continue with the current task, but sometimes we have to put it out. I think that's not only helped me, I guess, what organizing the test based on a deadline and the deliverable. I think that's a very important thing that I learned from school. That's not only helped me on a professional transition to professional, but also on many issues in life. So I think in a way, I guess the architect, and I think the training to work on a studio project, it's very critical. It's help you with a way of thinking. So I think in a way, you can move to other career after the training in architecture school. I don't know. So I think I really benefit from school of the training of critical thinking and the problem solving, rather than design skills or technical skill or the ability to use certain software. We have HED has a program with high school students. So I had high school interns, and they can learn design skill and the ability to use a software pretty fast when you put them on a real project. And it's my personal experience too. I think learning technical design and the software is very effective when you really are on a real project. So I think it's in school, it's a really good opportunity to gain the knowledge of a way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. That critical thinking, that is key. Because you have to look at a project and figure out solutions, find different solutions. And especially with sustainability, you really need to factor in all these different factors and what is best for the client, what is best for the environment, what's best for this condition. There's so many things that you need to think about to provide a good solution, and critical thinking is important for that. Denise, What are some misconceptions of being an interior designer in comparison to the realities of it?
Thank you, Crystal. One misconception is that we often get confused as decorators. It's understandable given all of like the different shows that are on the market, and we do share common overlap. However, I would say that the significant difference is that the interior designer modifies the interior architecture, including non-structural walls, stairs, openings, to create effective and beautiful spaces, while also coordinating elements for finishes, furniture, artwork, for all of that to work cohesively together in order to create a holistic experience. So it is, I would say it's like more in depth than to simply beautify a space. Another misconception is that we're not involved in the process of developing a building from the beginning. And although we may not be the main point of contact, the interior designer is very vital in ensuring that the building elements are arranged to suit the end user's functions. For example, it's not unusual for our team at HED to point out building elements that would be better located elsewhere to provide the client with more space or a better layout. These elements can be as big and as important as sometimes some structural elements or the furring that goes around them and the way that that looks, or it can be something that's as small as a switch location, which if it's placed on a decorative wall or on a writable surface, then at the end of the day, the client will not be happy with that specific location, and we won't either, especially if it's the wrong color.
Yes, interior design is really important. Gary, what is the future of landscape architecture, and why should the students consider it as a career track?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think the future of landscape architecture is getting brighter. So I have a couple of things. One are be selling the profession, but I also want to talk about why I think we need more students in landscape architecture. I think that landscape architecture is about context. It's about taking the built environment and trying to meld that more in the natural world. So when we talk about sustainability, net zero water, which hasn't been figured out in this town, for example, what are we actually doing? I think it's very interesting as we move forward about where landscape architecture is going. So not only when you put a building down someplace, you have to know what that place is, right? You have to understand. Before, I was looking at stuff from my father-in-law, who was an architect, and a lot of the buildings he designed when he was an architect in the 50s, you could put anywhere in the world, and they designed it that way. With air conditioning came a freedom to put buildings anywhere you want that looked anything like it would be back in the 50s to the 70s. Now that's not, as Rachel will probably attest to, that's not the best thing to do anymore. It's specific to LA. You should be building a building that is specific to LA. Its climate, what it's using as materials, and how it relates to the environment. So I think landscape architecture is a big component with that, dealing with sites. And from a horizontal point of view, our freeways, our roads, our parks, our open space, all of that is under the purview of a landscape architect. So I think that if you're interested in sustainability, I think landscape architecture has a very bright future ahead of it. Now, my selfish reason for wanting more students to come in here, especially students of color, is that think about from a landscape architecture point of view, there's a lot of planners in landscape architecture that are landscape architects that become city planners, urban planners. Think about decisions that are made prior to us building a building. That building should be there, how tall it should be, what type of building should be, the policies to make that building LEED silver, gold, platinum, net zero. All those decisions are made prior to us as building architects and landscape architects getting there. And most of those people are white males. So I would like you, all of you, to join our profession, because we lack a diversity and we lack those callings. We really do. And us being part of the Asian American architects and engineers, we need more Asians, we need more Hispanics, we need more Mexican Americans, Denise, we need more Filipinos, we need more African Americans. Only then would we be able to try to balance the scales of equity and environmental equity again, is a voice within the professions. So that's my pitch.
Very well said, Gary. Rachel, what are some tips to best prepare students interested in entering your field?
Thanks, Gary. You're a hard act to follow, and I have to answer a question after you. So, so the biggest tip I would have is don't ever think you're not qualified, because you are. Right. The biggest skill set you can bring to sustainability and resiliency is a passion and motivation to just change the way, not you, don't change yourself, help change the way the industry has been operating for hundreds of years, decades, because we need massive change in order to get to the carbon neutral future that we need. So if you have that passion and that fire and that drive inside you, I had to laugh because one of the question, Crystal, that I think you asked Denise was, what is a misconception? Well, a misconception about sustainability and resiliency is that people listen to us, because they don't, right? A lot of times they do not listen. So if you have that fire inside you, it's like there's a better way to design, there's a better way that this profession, or better direction this profession can head in, then that's, you've gone far down the path already of being an advocate, being a change agent of the type that we need to see. So the other thing is, I would say, get experience in a range of different topics, because so for myself, in any given day, I have to switch quickly from a school project to a transit maintenance facility to a master plan to helping an organization, as I said, with their own sustainability questions. It could be in different areas, but definitely and knowing if your career is dependent on identifying connections and connecting dots, then having experience in all of those different dots, even if it's just you worked for a few months on X project, that's great. That was enough exposure for you to at least understand the right questions to ask. You don't have to answer all the questions, but as long as you understand, oh, I need to ask that question, or I need to bring in that person. It's about making connections and being really passionate and motivated, so that when you hear 9 people tell you no, you hold out for that 10th person who'll say yes. It's like 4 out of 5 dentists, wait for that 5th dentist, and they will tell you that it's that chewing gum is the best one. So but just really just don't take no for an answer. Going back to the question about the different cultural backgrounds, that is also really important, because if you're working in a community that's made up of a bunch of different folks, or in a community that is different to the community that maybe you were raised in, seeing that difference is again, it's really important, knowing that this is, I have to understand what this community values, because it may not be the same as what I valued when I was growing up. So, and that's perfectly valid. I just have to understand what are the differences. What do they need? I can't come in and impose on this community what I think sustainability or resiliency means. I have to listen. I have to really listen. I have to know who are the voices to listen to in this community. What are they telling us, and how can we get them involved as well? So just have that motivation, have that desire, get experience in a lot of different topics. Don't listen to no, and be prepared to bring all of your life experiences to your job.
When working with communities, what is that process like? How do you, I guess, put yourself into their shoes, or how do you get a full understanding of what they want, or like how does their culture play into the project?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with listening. So the first thing you have to do is make yourself available. It also, the problem with community engagement, and Gary, I suspect you've probably got more experience than I do in talking with communities, but the problem is that it tends to, typical community engagement takes place at times of the day that doesn't allow a percentage of population to actually engage and to be present and to attend meetings. You know, if you're a single parent working 2 jobs, when are you going to have time to attend a community meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock or at noon or something? So it's think of as many different ways as possible to give members of the community an opportunity to voice their thoughts, whether it's in person, virtual, a lot of virtual engagement this last year. And don't ask questions that are leading, right? Be completely open. You tell me what do you need? We had a project here in Colorado where the client said, okay, I want to take this land and I want to put X on this land, and the community surrounding it said, hold on a second, that is not what we need. We don't even have safe sidewalks to walk to get to a grocery store. We don't even have a grocery store that we can walk to. We don't need another, recreation amenity. We don't need a beautiful park that would just sit there. We need safe access to a grocery store. And so it's letting, and don't go in with any preconceived notions. Just make sure that you say, I'm here to listen. You tell me what you need.
Yeah, I totally agree. Matter of fact, that's exactly what I was going to say, Rachel. The thing about it is that, we all have our biases, right? We all do. And the reason why they're called blind spots, because they're blind spots. You don't know they're there, right? So you have to push through that. You have to, when you're a designer, you make certain assumptions. You have to, but you have to test those assumptions. You cannot just put them down as law and then impose your will upon people who are going to be using your facilities. It's just not, it's not going to work. My biggest thrill is not the fact that, I designed something on a park and everybody's standing around and going, ooh and ah. My biggest thrill is that people are using the park and are happy at the park. It's the user that's important. So if we keep that in mind, it doesn't mean that you can't be creative. It doesn't mean that you can't be the lead designer. It doesn't mean that. It means that you're designing for people. That's the main thing. And with that, you have to listen and you have to try to push through your biases. You have to do that. I know very little about an African-American community and what they have to go through. And I had to learn working in South LA. And if I wasn't open to learning, it would not have been a successful project. That's just the absolute bottom line. And I have biases that I had to push through. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that as a society, that we all have biases, and it's not wrong to have biases. It's wrong to double down on them countless and countless times and believe that you're the only one that has the right answers.
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit on that too. And I think, as students, I'm sure everybody's wondering like, okay, but like, where do we start? How do we start learning about those biases, those things that kind of biasly influence our decision making? And, just look around you, right? Your studio mates is a great place to start. You're probably thinking, these are my greatest, these are all my competition, they're my competitors, which are right. But at the same time, they're your strongest allies. They're your resources, they're your teachers. So, start talking to your studio mates, ask them for their opinion, ask them what they would do better. If you think somebody's doing something that's working, ask them, how did they get there? Really kind of just work together and learn from each other. I think this idea of making connections and listening and just, just kind of keeping an open mind. It really starts at school. It really starts at your in studio when you're working with kind of everyone around you.
So it looks like we only have a few minutes left. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, feel free. We'll make this an open forum. Or if any panelists have questions for each other, that's great too.
I'll ask. This is Mike Inamoto. I'm not a student, but on behalf of all the students and young professionals, I think what one piece of advice would you give to all the young people who are not have not made it yet?
Well, I'll jump in. If you're in a meeting and you have an idea, speak up, because there's just this really this drive and this refreshing view of the world that we're seeing coming from your generation. That is what is absolutely going to save our society, right? Because other generations, myself included, my generation have failed to do the right thing every time. And so if you're in a meeting, speak up. And if you're not heard the first time, keep speaking up. And if you're continually not heard, then maybe find another job. But but just keep speaking up in meeting, because your voice is valuable, and you've seen things in your life that give you that valuable perspective. And just always make sure that you are working somewhere that you feel you can speak up in a meeting and be heard. I mean, respectfully, obviously, but.
I think it's really important for you to keep your core values intact. That develop a core value maybe first, like maybe I had to do when I was younger. But once you realize that that's the right thing to do, as what you feel like you're doing, I think that you need to keep that intact. I think that will help you as you go through difficulties going through your profession, trying to decide what you want to do. But if you're keeping true to your core values, and I don't mean money. A lot of my friends, I still keep in touch with a group of friends from high school. All of them went after the money. It was my generation, Generation X. We all went, that was what you were supposed to do. And all of them have been changing jobs as they get to be my age in the 50s. It's because they never kept their core values. I would never tell them that. You guys are going to keep that secret, right? But they are looking for something with more meaning than money. Money is not going to be the one that's going to get you where you want to be when you become my age. That's just a life lesson that I've
learned. Yeah, I would I agree with that tenfold, and also to not stop exploring. Right, there's a million different directions you can go. The industry is as vast as it is deep, and you have free reign to kind of swim in the direction that you choose. Maybe a bad metaphor for me because I physically can't swim, but maybe that's why I'm drowning all the time. But I encourage you to just continue to explore, like Gary was saying, kind of establish those core values and truly find what it is that fascinates you, what it is that you love, and intern if you can at as many places as possible to gain kind of those different perspectives in the different types of work that is involved in this industry.
I would also like to add to what everyone has mentioned and say that the beauty of architecture is that it's not a ladder. It's more like an all-encompassing umbrella. So the benefit is that you can make it what you want it to be based off of your interests. So the wonderful thing about school right now is that you can really explore all of the things that you're interested in. Like if you're interested in sustainability, take an opportunity to make your project more sustainable and like really explore and think about how you can make that transformation. Because at the end of the day, these are going to be the projects that you're going to show to potential employers. And so when they see that you have an interest in all of these different elements, they're going to be inspired by that and they're going to want to hear more. So all of your interests are of value and all of your experiences are valid, and you have so much to gain from all of that. So don't be dissuaded if you don't know specifically what you want to be interested in or what you are interested in. that's where the internships come into play. Like if you intern at a place for a couple of months, then you're able to see, okay, well, I like this, I don't like this, I'm more interested in that. And then that's when you can explore more, or even attending events. There's a lot of opportunity for you to learn. And that does not end as soon as you graduate. It just keeps evolving.
Yeah, I'll just add one last thing. Find a mentor. Having a mentor really, really helped me throughout, even when I was working, and even up until recently. So find someone that can give you advice and see maybe a few steps ahead of you and help you also see a few steps ahead. That's really helpful too.
I will also add this to believe in yourself. When you given the opportunity for a task, even though that seems scary, go for it. Grab it, and then I promise it will be fine.
Great advice, everyone. Thank you so much. We're a little over time, so I think that's it. That's all we have for today. Thank you to the panelists and participants for an awesome kickstart to the AAae AEC Careers Explained series. The next webinar will focus on the building engineers discipline, and that's on July 13th. Look out for the registration email and share with your MEP structural engineering friends. Connect with us on social media, and stay tuned for more information in the near future. Thank you and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.